Do you need a mic?
No, we're going to shout.
Shout. Shout.
Welcome everybody, thank you for coming to Siobhan Davis Studios tonight for this brilliant launch. I'm Annie and this is Kat. We are the artistic directors of Siobhan Davis Studios. We're just going to talk for a very small amount of time to give a bit of context to the work.
Okay, we're completely delighted to host Tally as our third material archive artist. So this time last year, we launched the Artist Archive programme with Valerie Abua, who I think and followed that with a collaboration with Jemima Hoadley and Camilla Greenwell. That happened in spring this year. And so this is the third one. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Material Archive is one of 3 strands of our Artist Archive programme. So please look out for the other strands, which are digital and live. We'll be doing more of those from spring next year.
So a bit of context about the overall programme. Artist Archive is the name of the programme. It's an annual programme dedicated to the revival and the rehoming of existing works by dance artists. And the programme questions what an archive is and who gets to have one. Artist Archive prioritises artists and their past works that were either unfunded or underfunded, had few opportunities to be presented, that resist the mainstream, and that might otherwise be lost and or forgotten.
So we're going to hand back to Tally and to Nabil. I just want to say one more thing. This archive is up here in this building till the 1st of March. So come back, tell your mates, come back and be with the work. We're really happy for you to come and hang out here. So Tally and Nabil.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi guys. Hi. There is an option to come closer, but we will create the intimacy from where we are. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. There's quite a lot of people in here that I don't think know me, so I'll introduce myself a little bit. I was like, is that my parents? It's Amanda Pefku, hi. I will do that, it's a latecomers thing that I do. I just like full name them, hello. So my government name is Chanel Fergus, but I am largely known as Tally at the hands of Kenrick H2O Sandy, who gave me my alias that I've carried for the past 2 decades. And I am now a choreographer, a facilitator, predominantly of my own professional development program, Identity Ideas Industry, otherwise known as III. I'm agency manager of Zoo Nation, the Cape Prince company. Are there any other ands? Those might be the ands. Those are my ands. I largely exist here as the host of a monthly improv session downstairs, and that's how I think I came to know about the archive application. And Mum Edit More is my only piece of theatre that exists. I've danced in theatre a lot, but it's my only one. Last performed on stage in 2018, as you may see downstairs under the stairs. And I'm really proud of the work. I think, oh hi, I was happy for Resolution 2018 to be the last time it was seen, but equally I'm really happy for it to exist in the building, especially in this way. Process for me is the most enjoyable part of making a thing. It's the longest part of the entire, Resolution existed as a 20-minute piece in the end, which when you're on your own does feel like 20 minutes. But when you're doing like a 5-minute thing, it's over in a heartbeat. So for it to embed itself here in the way that I've chosen to do it is a really cool thing. I was inspired to make the work really by Solange Knowles had an interlude on her A Seat at the Table album where her mum is speaking. I can't quite remember what her mum was speaking about, but it was about her mum speaking, and that was inspiring to me, and I actually intended to make to that. But then somehow, can't quite remember the exact timeline, but I grew up in southeast London, and Brixton was a large part of the commute if I joined my mum going to work. I sat in Red Records on the high street with my dad for many a time as a young one, legs swinging on the stool while he flicked through and played loads of things and bought nothing. And so Brixton is a place that I knew, and I found myself there in the late 2010s and just being like, what the fuck is this? My mum has to see this. And so we went for what I've called in the exhibition guide a sightseeing lunch. There's a term, something tourism, you know, where people go to like check out the hood. And it was like the opposite for us. It was just like, we're gonna go and check out like what on earth is happening here. And I was compelled to ask my mum to talk about it. So when I went to yoga one evening, I just left her with my phone. And what you will hear under the stairs, or if you scan the QR code on the first floor, is that voice note. I grew up on a housing estate, a council estate, Sydenham Hill Estate. I went to school in Sydenham. We then moved to a slightly smaller one that, I'm just saying this for context, but it backed onto a bigger estate called Sheenwood. And then through house shares, I then became a property guardian. Does anyone know what that is? Are you one? You seem knowing. Part of me really highly recommends it in these cosy lives. Essentially, when buildings change hands, if for any reason this building was to change hands, instead of them hiring a security firm to look after it, they rent it out so you can live in it. I was paying £450 a month to live in Peckham, like for context. You can't get a room for that. So great, but you're on a rolling contract, so I can leave with a month's notice, but then they can also kick you out with a month's notice. But I lived in a former care home in Peckham for 3 years. They kicked me out during COVID, stellar. And then I moved into where I am now, which is Cressingham Gardens in Tulse Hill. So large part of my living has been and currently is in council estates. And it's a bit strong to maybe call it a passion, but I just think there's a huge misconception on who lives there, what is possible as a result of living there. By design, as a property guardian, I'm living in spaces that will be knocked down. So I'm living in spaces that I can see are perfectly fit for purpose, but they're seeing otherwise and seeing room to, like the real estate of the estate that I live on, if they were to do high rises, it backs onto Brockwell Park. I can see why, but it houses hundreds, if not 1,000 people that are perfectly happy with where they are. So I think more so than being galvanized to make the change, which is why Nabil is here, I am galvanized to just shed light on what's happening in these spaces. And the work was a gentle way of doing that. The exhibition exists gently. Without the exhibition guide, you'll probably pass by lots of it and not even know that it's there. That is by design. I consider myself, I'm a bit mouthy, but I consider myself to be gentle. My work is gentle. I'd like you to come across it rather than have it thrown at you. I like it to be somewhat quiet so that your response can be loud rather than that. That's nice for the mics, isn't it, Lee? So you may miss bits, but then there's also like an underlying thing that's not so by design, that I've been invited into this institution but don't want to make too much of a statement here, so I'll just fall back and exist in the walls. So you'll find the work on the walls and on the screens and such and such. My lovely guest Nabil here, I came across his work, big plug alert, a book called Privatise the Mandem, which you can get from Waterstones. It also exists in the stack of books downstairs, so if you're here often, please do get through it. I got through it in a day. And I was introduced to it by an artist called Daryl Daly, I think, on his stories, and it just struck me as a really accessible, solution-based work that isn't, it's not a quick fix by any means, but it just provides a way for us to reclaim our spaces and feel proud of them. Like Nabil talks about them like their castles and their manors and we're kings and we're queens, and I just think 10, 10, 10. So my spiel over, I will allow Nabil to introduce himself, and then we'll go on a wild ride from there. So Nabil, everybody.
Yeah. Wow, can you hear me? Yes. Hi everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Nabil Al-Kinani. 28-year-old, I'm from Northwest London, so the other side of the map.
South for life.
My sort of trade is, aside from writing, I'm a built environment professional. So I have a lot of inside knowledge on the inner workings of why gentrification and urban change is seen throughout London. And I've taken it upon myself to try and democratize as much information as possible. So prior to sort of me writing this book, prior to me even starting the work, I grew up on the Chalkhill Estate in Northwest London, which is in Wembley, right next to the Wembley Stadium. So I could hear the goals get scored before it came up on TV. Decided I didn't watch football anymore, just ruined it. I grew up sort of taking in sources of knowledge that some may deem unconventional. I got a lot of my knowledge from boys in the hood. I'd listen to Jay-Z, I'd listen to Nas, I'd listen to UK rappers, and a lot of my knowledge is an amalgamation of those experiences. And I was fortunate enough to end up working for one of those intellectuals that I looked at growing up. So I looked up to growing up in George the Poet. And I spent a lot of time with him, and like Tally, I got a bit of a mouth on me. My mouth led me to getting noticed by the private developer next door building Wembley Park. And they emailed me out of the blue offering me a job because they wanted local insight. I initially didn't want to take the job, but George kind of tasked me with a mission that has stuck with me today, in essentially telling me that the city, as we know it, is being shaped at a relentless speed, and the views and needs of our communities are not necessarily kept in mind. So take it as a responsibility, although it's a tiny corner in London, ensure that the views of the Manama are essentially baked into what's being built here. And secondly, and the most important one, is people may not necessarily realize, but gentrification is the biggest threat to our communities. And so whatever you learn, ensure that you share. And so, I don't know how many years, I've been in this industry for 5 years, a couple years into it. I kind of put together all of the relevant information that I felt like would help lead us to a better circumstance in the city, and kind of coming across Tally's work, the shared experience that we all have. She's from Southeast London, but in Northwest London we have the same shared experience. Showed me there's a lot of synergy, and I greatly value the archiving of our stories, because they're seldom told, and the majority of the narrative that's out there and considered knowledge that's acceptable, or knowledge that's rational, doesn't necessarily come from us. So I got to commend Tally for everything that she's been doing.
Oh, thanks, man. Just a quick show of hands. Does anyone currently live on a housing estate? Has anyone ever lived on a council estate? Copy that. Thank you. Raise them high. I wanted to, when I was showing Nabil around the space, it's a very small QR code. Hopefully you can see it a little clearer now, it's dark, but I wanted my mum's words to be heard through that window, whilst looking through that window, just because it's just so crudely laid out, like what is happening there. Just the cranes and the blocks. Went for food just before we started, and like the way that they're building around Elephant Park, I was just like, how is the light gonna get in? It just looks like it's just gonna just be shrouded in darkness. That's a bit of a sideline because that wasn't my point. But while showing Nabil around, he was like, I've got some stuff to say on that. So I thought it would be cool, given where we are now, and that in the context of South London, and I'm sure London in general, what's happening here is a real, like a huge example of gentrification. And I just wanted to open the space for Nabil to give us some of his thoughts on that.
Thank you. Where do we start? We can start, okay.
What's happening?
What's happening? So, Elephant and Castle today, or better known as Elephant Park, was once the Haygate Estate. And the Haygate Estate, apologies if I get the numbers wrong, was home to approximately 5,000 families, all from working class backgrounds. And estates like the Haygate were part of a housing boom that took place after the end of the World War. It was when Britain was feeling a little bit socialist and decided that it cared about its people following the end of the war. Following that period, the idea of capitalism and the pursuit for profit and the change of hands with politicians, specifically the Thatcherite government, decided that it had to exploit as much as possible the land within the public sector's control in order to grow. And so this idea of growth, even like stands to this day. So the Haygate Estate was home to a lot of socially rented apartments, and the alternative was we could charge much higher rents for the gentry. So the gentry is an Anglo-Saxon feudalist term, meaning someone who's well-to-do and can afford rents. And funnily enough, Anglo-Saxon feudal English also called lower-class individuals villains with an E, and that became a derogatory term. And the word villain that we use today very much describes what in feudal Britain would have been a working class serf, someone who occupied the land of the Lord and paid rents in order to occupy the space. A lot of feudal Britain is still hard-baked into UK politics. So the earth was once a common treasury for all. Therefore, a lot of Britain was called the Commons. And the people that would move towards across the land were called commoners. And then the Lords one day came and decided to put enclosures. So if you drive through the English countryside, you'll see like stones stacked. And that was the Lords laying claim to the land. And there was a lot of issues between the commoners and the Lords because the Lords wouldn't allow people to occupy their land without rent. It would be trespassing. Fast forward a couple hundred years, in order to allow this discourse to happen, the House of Lords was set up and the House of Commons was set up. And today, even with the politics, the political landscape that we're in today, the landowner is the most powerful person in Britain. Most landowners are in pursuit of profit. Some for self-gain, but once upon a time, the state owned land. And the state in the post-war era built homes because it had a socialist mindset. The Tory government in the last 20 years have cut the majority of local authority funds. Almost by 80% of council budgets has been removed as an austerity measure. As a result, councils are no longer able to maintain these buildings, and these spaces experience something called management decline. So it's a managed decline and deterioration of these buildings. You then have private sector interests come and introduce the narrative, and this is where your work comes in, and it's extremely important, the archiving of stories and narratives. For long periods of time, specifically in the past 30, 40 years, the idea of a chav, the idea of yobs, the idea of villains occupying these ugly concrete jungles helps spur on this idea that this place must be regenerated. Regeneration, the root word, genesis, means to bring life into something. But in actual fact, if we look at cultural history of Britain, it's from these places that all, if not, all cultural capital is produced. So the majority of our athletes, they come from the ends. The majority of our musicians, the majority of our creatives who go on and produce beautiful pieces of work use the ends as their creative source. So I challenge the idea that this place needs to be regenerated, and I challenge the idea that life is introduced by changing the social makeup of the ends. There are some backdoor deals that take place as well. So for instance, the Haygate estate was only sold to the private developer for 50 million, sorry.
I was like, bargain! Wow, why am I moving to Margate?
So the land was sold in totality at 50 million, but the council spent 44 million decanting residents from the estate, which meant the council only gained 6 million from that land sale. So we're asked the question, what did the council have to gain from the sale of this land? These austerity measures don't help when in 2011, the introduction of the Localism Act by good old David Cameron allowed the public sector to offset the responsibility of social housing to the private sector. So then the public sector, which couldn't afford to build anymore, would, in order to alleviate the pressures in their budgets as a result of austerity, would sell land to the private developer in the hopes that they could harvest housing from the private developers' plans, such as Elephant Park. But what you'll find in a lot of new developments across the city is the emergence of the poor door. So you have the main entrance of the high-paying rental tenants, and along the back you'll have the private developer, in order to maximize profit, provide a different experience for those paying less. And so we're starting to see that across the city, in King's Cross, in Elephant Park, in Wembley Park, and all of these large-scale developments. And amidst this whole mess, it really is the Mandem that are drawing the short straw. Our interests are never sort of represented. Our interests are never taken into account when these decisions are made. So I just thought, fuck it, man. Let's try and work out a way to remove the responsibility of our shelter, our homes, from these people who are in bed with developers. And by working for private developers, by the developer next door, I managed to be exposed to a lot of information that isn't widely known in the public sphere. And so I took all that information and I wrote 80 pages in plain English, without the euphemisms, without the unneeded complexity, and laid out the process for how the Mandem can collectively acquire the land that they occupy. it's definitely a long-term plan. It's not something that can happen tomorrow. But I see it as one of the only solutions that can protect and insulate us from the ever-growing thirst and hunger from the market to produce capital. Yeah.
So that's what's happening. Thank you. Like I did think, yeah, go. I think for every bar that Nabil drops, I'm just thinking of like instances that I can think of that just humanize it or personalize it for me, and I hope that's happening for some of you guys as well. Like I have a friend who don't know what's happening in Croydon. Do you know what's happening in Croydon? Croydon's like the land that will someday be the place everyone in South flocks to, but it's yet to happen. But a friend of mine lives in one of the new builds there, and when I went to visit her, like I'd passed her block before and it's all grand pillars and like glass doors and concierge, and then she met me at the station and we walked in that looked like a cleaner's entrance almost. I was like, this is and that would be the Pordor. There's blocks in Vauxhall with that pool that joins them, that like certain residents of that block, they're not allowed to use. So it's not just a different entrance, but you don't even have access to the things that are happening in that building. And it's not like your rent is a tenth of the price. Like it's still very, very wild. There was something in what you said, somewhat of a segue, and I think just selfishly I want to voice it in hope that there are like nods when I speak, but as someone that lived in Peckham 2017 to 2020, and when I was growing up, all that I would do there is grab my pick and mix from Woolworths and then run into Peckhamplex, like no need to be in Peckham. Like, my mum's like, on the bus, on the 312, and you get home. And suddenly there are many places that I want to be there. And I carry some guilt around that because I think now I'm actually considered, if I look at income bracket, I think I'm considered middle class somehow. Definitely don't identify as such, but I can afford to be at Frank's paying $7.50 for avocado and toast. But the first time I was up there, I was just like, who on earth is this for? Like, this is not for the people that are from here. That then takes me on to like Morley's. Sweet Morley's.
It's Sam's in Northwest. It's Sam's in Northwest.
It is Sam's, but we're talking about Morley's now, Nabil. They just did a pop-up at the Standard Hotel in Leicester Square, and you paid £20 for Morley's. It was still Morley's, but it had a spoonful of caviar on top. And it's just like, what is happening? Like, me and my friend Nicey very much wanted to go because there were really other cool dishes we wanted to try, but there's just a sense of like, again, the question just is like, what is happening? And to be in the center of it at the age that I'm at, although it affects us all, it's as I kind of, work harder, make money, can enjoy these things, is just like, but should I be though? And I grew up with Morley, so this is exciting, but and I don't carry, it's not, I drag it around daily, but it is something that I wanted to put word to because it is a real thing, and I don't think I'm alone in it, whether it's in the subconscious or otherwise. I wonder about, not specifically, just getting a bit more specific than working class people, but more, well, first, when you say Mandem, for those of us that might not know, what do you mean?
All right, so I knew this question was coming. So in the book, the first sentence reads as such. It goes, this was written for the Mandem being the aunties, the uncles, the young bucks, the girls, the guys, the sisters, the ackies, the preachers, and the sinners. Anyone and everyone that makes up our inner city communities. Hear me out for a second. That's who the Mandem are. So the Mandem is, you have to pay homage. I came as a refugee in 1998. I'm Arab.
So am I.
So am I. All right, a good way to explain it. Only in London will you ever hear, well, Manchester and only in Britain, in multicultural Britain, will you ever hear a sentence saying, "Wagwan ma'ak"? Mandem, the term comes from Jamaican English patois. And as a refugee, I came to Britain and joined a story that started before me. And it was Black Britain that welcomed not just the Arab community, but the West African, the Somali, the Afghani community. In comparison to sort of today's Tory Britain that wants to stop the boats and thinks multiculturalism has failed, it's the aunties and uncles who would invite me over for Christmas dinner, even though I was Muslim. Do you know what I mean? So it's, when I say Mandem, I'm talking about the people from the ends who have a shared connection, a shared love, by virtue of just sharing the same geographical space. And then people want me to delve a little bit deeper. Like, but what is the Mandem? What does it mean? And I say, bruv, I can't lie. I don't know. But one thing I'm sure of is that there are a group or population in Britain that have similar hairstyles, have a shared love for music, all happen to wear Nike Techs and Air Forces or Air Maxes, depends which generation you're from, and subscribe to particular rules, morals, and principles, irrespective of how melanated their skin is, at varying levels. So one thing I can say for sure is the Mandem exists. I'm not good at categorizing, and I'm not an anthropologist or a sociologist or all them other agists. So I'll leave it to them. But when I say the Mandem know who they are. Do you know what I mean?
It's been great, guys. And then my follow-on from that is, what is the effect of gentrification day to day on those, on the Mandem?
So I've been reading a lot of Professor Loretta Lees, who is the foremost academic thinker when it comes to gentrification, one of the only ones who's not scared to call it for what it is. Gentrification, the effects of gentrification is mainly displacement. And the displacement comes in three forms. The first one is direct displacement, like in the Haygate estate, where buildings were demolished, people were decanted, and did not have the option to return. So 5,000 families, and I think it was 1,000 council flats with only 800 and something affordable homes built. Now let me tell you something about affordable. Affordable is not socially rented. They're two different things. In fact, Sadiq Khan and the Greater London Authority has a dictionary for the 5 definitions of affordable, none of which is at the same rent as social tenancies. So direct displacement. The second form is indirect displacement. So you may have a piece of land that didn't have social housing, you didn't decant anyone, but you build high value apartments and amenities that incentivizes other private landowners around the area to drive up their rents because my value's gone up. And so the laundrette that you would have walked down the road to and suddenly can't afford rent, and it will be replaced with a coffee shop for sure, charging £6 for a cup of coffee. That's not even that nice.
Word.
And the third form is phenomenological, which is a mouthful to say, but it's the absence of certain landmarks that give someone a sense of place, a sense of belonging. So an example would be, bad example, but Oxford Street. You know which end of Oxford Street you're in when you see Selfridges and when you see Centre Point. If you remove Centre Point, people don't know that they're in Tottenham Court Road. And for a lot of people, especially on the neurodiverse spectrum, they hold on to these landmarks to locate themselves within a space. So the damages as a result of displacement comes in four forms. The first one is cultural. Let's talk about South Kilburn. South Kilburn is basically Habesha, which is made up of Eritrean, Ethiopian communities. And a lot of these families depend on each other. There's a shared cultural context and community banking. So similar in Caribbean culture, the partner. A lot of our parents did not have the credit score to get loans from the banks. So what they would do is they would bring their neighbors together. Each person pays 100, and every month someone receives 10. And these community banking interest-free systems only exist when the network is there. If you displace and you destroy that network, you're destroying people's access to funds, you're destroying people's social networks, and you're essentially creating a much more lonelier city. The second one is economic, like we already touched on, the rising rents, the lack of community banking, but also the sort of, we start to see a monopoly on what sort of businesses occupy a particular space. So the death of the high street is one of the worst things that happened to this country, because you could have a business idea and all you needed to do was find a unit for you to rent out and test your idea. But what we're seeing in a lot of places like Battersea Power Station, like Wembley Park, like King's Cross, when a single landowner occupies the whole of the retail spaces within a piece of the city, and they have a particular view of the world. I'm not trying to bring Auntie and her hair shop. Do you know what I mean?
They can stay in Peckham
They
Palms.
can stay there.
Over there, yeah.
So people are economically excluded. The damage it does to education is also quite major. So a lot of children who are part of decanted families who've had to move will have to travel further to go to school. Or even worse, they'll have to go to a different school and interrupt the flow of education. And then the cultural changes I need to touch on. Brixton is a perfect example of that. Brixton was home of the British Black Panthers. You go there now, it's
Not that.
not that.
It is not that.
Yeah.
I said Peckham Palms while Nabil was talking there, and just to give context to that. So, well, largely when I come out of Peckham Rise Station now, I'm seeing lots of people that have come from Essex for their Saturday night out, and they're, staring at the phones. I'm like, I think you want Bussey Building or Franks. They're that away. But when you turn right out of the station, there are still some hair shops there, but that was all that was there. And I'm not entirely sure what they've built up on that corner now, but they've moved all the hair shops to a place called Peckham Palms, which sounds lovely, but it is away. You are not going to just happen across that. So if you weren't a patron of that space before, you're not finding it. And it's nice for them to all be together, but as is written downstairs, did they want to be there? Did they have a choice to go there? Was that the only way to keep their business in the town, at all? And as of now, for what exactly? Like, I'm not quite understanding why they've had to move. I'm aware that this entire panel could be about what is happening on this Babylon island, and just like go deeper and deeper into like the despair of the current affairs. And it's not about, we spoke downstairs, and I'm going to bring to light what we said that we could possibly keep between us, but I'm, as people that know me here as a teacher or peer or friend will know, that like code switching is not a part of my day-to-day. Like, I'm going to be me wherever in space I am. But as we were talking downstairs, code switching being like a shapeshift depending on who you're in space with. And we spoke about like who's coming, and like just so Nabil knows who he's talking to in case he needs to code switch. And part of that was like, so who currently lives on a housing estate? Whoever has, just to kind of get a spread. But I personally will be damned if I let, not in the context of this conversation, but in any, like for me to, as I said to Nabil, if I know one person in the space, I'm gonna be making sure they're there because they understand me. So I'm gonna be not talking to them, but that's the language I'm gonna be speaking, and then hopefully other people join in. But I would hate for the person that relates to me and that I know to not recognize the person that's sat here, because I'm trying to make sure that everyone else understands. And I'm partly saying that as a, like shape-shifting, code switching to a teacher for my students, but also for those that might not know me. We all fall into a minority of some type, I'm sure, that I just encourage you. It's not always possible, and it's really not easy to do, but just to show up as you in all spaces, because the question that I'm going to ask Nabil next being day to day, what can we do? I think that is part of it. And like, I am a product of my environment. I don't know, maybe my parents are drinking cocktails downstairs somewhere, but if they were here, I'd be like, look who made me. But they made me, but I do identify heavily as a South Londoner. And I don't like introduce, well, no, I do. I'm like, I'm Tally and I'm from South London. So like that's coming everywhere, and it will never be like British. Like, I carry that, and I encourage you all not to wear your labels, but however you do identify and show up when you're comfortable, to just inch towards that in uncomfortable spaces. And now in the context of the gentrification and landscape of it all, this is the long game. And as it says in it, I believe it's like reading it and passing it on to like our children, because it's potentially going to be their job to like really, really do it.
Yeah.
What's available to us day to day to aid this?
I wish you emailed me this question so that I can prepare.
It's a conversation, you know, it's free flowing.
So you touched on it earlier. A really, really good friend of mine once said, the secret to survival is by telling your own story. And I believe in that firmly. Stories make the world go round. Stories can make a nation and they can break a nation. Humans rally under symbols, ideas. Now we're talking about organizing in a magnitude that is unheard of since the 70s. Yeah. And what society is good at doing to us now is fracturing us and dividing us. And so, speaking personally, I've seen an increase in hedonism, an increase in the gratification for self, and putting oneself and one's own interest above the interest of the collective. Now, I sound like a Marxist. not trying to, I'm not advocating for I'm not advocating for communism, but neither am I advocating for capitalism. I think what I'm trying to advocate for is the importance of holding your people close, and knowing who your people are. And I'm gonna go bell hooks on you guys.
Bring it on.
It actually is fully all about love, because everything you do is laced with how you're feeling. So this book could have been 90 pages of bitching, like gentrification is bad, you lot did this and you lot did this, blah, 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 blah. But it's not. I'll probably spend a paragraph talking about that. What it is it's a love letter to my people. And it's less about the fight, and it's more about nurturing the people who built you. I think we've lived in a society where it's like, you know, I came from ends, I left, thank God, yeah? Mm-hmm. And like, I don't owe these people nothing. Mm-hmm. And my success is mine and mine alone. And really, I challenge that, because we are all canvases painted by the people who raised us. And when I say raised us, I don't necessarily mean just your mother. I'm talking about your mother's friend. I'm talking about your teacher. I'm talking about your bus driver, the same one who you got on the 2974 to go all the way to Harsden to go to school for. Like, we are a compilation of all of the people that came before us. And we hold that memory in our being. I can't turn around and say I owe no one nothing. Mm-hmm. It don't make sense. Mm-hmm. So if I see success, there's an onus on me to break bread with the people who allowed me to gain that bread in the first place. So it's more, stop thinking in an individual capacity, but see yourself as belonging to people. My mum still thinks she's living in Iraq. So I'm from Chalk Hill, I'm in Wembley, you step through my door, you're in Baghdad. Yeah. My mum will always describe somebody who is of good character with a phrase, Hada ibn Nas or Haya bit Nas, which means this person is a child of people. That's an indicator of good character. My people happen to be the man. They're the multicultural society that Suella Braverman hates. But that's my people. And I'm a son of these people. And my success is their success. Now, that doesn't mean my individual success or my individuality doesn't shine through. It does. And the Mandem is a perfect example of it. Mm-hmm. Like, even the word ak, the fact that it's become like part of the multicultural vernacular of Britain, and it's adopted by people who are otherwise not
Is
Arab.
that a Northwest thing? Because I can't say that I know it.
All right, forget
Am I
this
alone?
Northwest. Aki.
No, I know Aki,
Yeah.
but it is a term of endearment. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know that.
Maybe you
I am
guys in
36.
Southeast. Don't do that. Don't do that.
I shouldn't have done that.
But all right. I'm gonna. If you're from Ends, you know Mist from Birmingham, the rapper. His bars. He says Apnas and Kalas, and like that's. I think it's Punjabi, or I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's one of the South Asian languages, mm-hmm. and like there's a love and appreciation in sharing one's own personal cultural stuff, and it in turn being loved and adopted and recognized. So yeah, stop thinking of yourself. Think collectively, and then slowly, this will be second nature. I hope that answers your question.
It very did.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to clap. You clap if you want to clap, Sass. You may have done it already, but on the off chance that you don't engage with the people that are in this room again, is there anything else that you would want them to know, whether it be about you, the topic, the book?
Two things. First one is, this is a complex topic, and I'm sure you probably have more questions than answers, and we probably won't answer them here, but I've got a dedicated line specifically on my phone for this. I won't answer immediately, forgive me. But I've got so many +44s from so many people asking me any and every question relating to this, and I will do everything in my power to respond.
Would you like to share that phone number in case anyone wants to take it?
I don't know it by heart.
Fair enough.
But privatize the Mandem with an S, not a Z, because we're not American. The number is there. It's on the Instagram, Privatize the Mandem, and there's a website, privatizethemandem.com. You can get copies for Privatize the Mandem only from the website. I didn't go to any retailer. You won't find it in Waterstones. You won't find. Did you?
Yeah.
Are they stocking my shit?
$16.99. It's $16.99. Yeah, it's on the reading list.
Was it out of stock? I need to chat to my agent.
I'll check when we're done, but I definitely found it, yeah.
Well, I intentionally, the book is intentionally, not by choice, not in any of the bookshops, purely because the Mandem don't go bookshops at the moment, and that's the audience.
Right.
And so I would much rather I hand it to them, and them seeking it out and ordering it direct from Thing than have Amazon take 40%.
I mean, I slid in your DMs and said that I loved what you were doing, and you asked for my address and you sent me a copy.
Yeah,
so.
man. Like this isn't a profit-making thing. I don't make any money from this. It's the only margin that's made from sales is to print more books.
Right.
So that's the first one. Shout me. The second one is gonna come full circle back to both your work and I hope your work as well. You have to be shameless, man. Like, tell your stories, and tell it loud and tell it proud, and run them in every single form you can. Let it be dance, let it be through music, let it be through film, let it be through literature, whatever you can. Establish your narrative and your story, because there is no such thing as an objective truth. Everything is subjective. And the more subjective truths we have, the closer we get to an objective reality. So run your stories. That's it. Thank you.
Very, very much. Mad behaviour. I was like, if this guy carries on. Thanks. Doesn't cut it. Are you running away after?
I can mingle, but I'm shy, so.
Right, okay. No, thank you for saying so. Would not have got that from what just happened. But yeah, like Nabil says, he has a line, so you can drop him a line. Nuggets, I hope. And yeah, stuff that I hope stays with you past this evening. I'm not going anywhere. To the bar, but I am around. To the bar. In that, I just want to shout out. Would an American way to say it be contributors? Either way, the peeps I got involved tonight. They are mostly known to me through dance and as dance creatives, but they have and are continually shape-shifting into other realms, and they're just the toppest of tiers. And Luke over there roaming with a handheld. You wanted me to look into camera. There, you've got it. This is the time. Luke Lentes runs The Capsule, which is a street dance organisation that has a weekly podcast. I'm largely there, which is why I'm managing to do this without mostly shaking and being a bit of a awkward turtle, which I've just done. Had to get there eventually, but largely covers the battle scene and the street styles, but also lectures at UEL because he's an absolute G. All things event coverage, all things panel, pod. Luke is your man. We have Glade, who may have left the room in anticipation of providing more beats. But Glade Marie is just a beautiful, wonderful, very knowledgeable DJ. I've tasked her with just playing Black British sounds tonight, and that is what is occurring, and didn't have to give her any recommendations or anything. She is just flying free for 3 hours, lucky us. We've got Moves Magazine in the building. Emily is on the floor and Shakiri is there. They are a fairly new organisation. I think I'm hoping that I'm getting this right, but just heightening the quality of documentation of dance. I think it's not all got fashion in it, but I think with fashion editorial as the kind of, not landscape, but inspiration of how it's shown and shot. I've had them in, since I first had them in space, I've had them in every space. So that speaks to their quality. Come on in, don't peer through, it's the end, but... We have Lamel. So Lamel Clark I have known as a dancer for more than a decade. Hi, DJ. He now works at Seed Library in Shoreditch and is a top-tier mixologist. So the drinks that are available downstairs are only available this evening. I asked him to make something representing Brixton past and Brixton present. I let him know that spicy margaritas are my jam. So that's why we have a Scotch bonnet daiquiri, and then Lamel arrived at the little wine bars that pop up, and that being a bit weird, but we can make a cool drink. He's got a lovely write-up on the menu that I invite you to read, and please take advantage of the beverages if indeed you drink. I did notice through my friend arriving that's not drinking that I didn't ask him to make a mocktail. I'm so sorry. So selfish. I was like, spirit. Am I missing anybody? No, because he's here. Thank you so much again. I will see you all out there in the wilderness. They're gonna hate this, but my parents are here. Yeah. Thank you guys. I'll see you at the bar. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Good. Appreciate you.
What a G.
Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I was sat out there, I would have been bawling probably, but I kept it together.
That was so cool. It's like thank you so much. Yeah, oh, so good. It really made me think of many things. But one of the things that Annie and I wanted to do when we first got here, and we never quite managed to do it, was like stuff with people from beyond the arts to kind of speak and do and take action with people from within the local community here and the dance so hot. And it really made me brilliant. I was like, oh my god, this is what we're working on.
Something you
Just going to say bye to them and then I'll come.
And it really put it right back in the front of my mind. So.
Yeah, we're getting you back. This configuration was
happening again.
Yeah, we're gonna
Thank you.